What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Real quick before we dive in, if you're not subscribed yet, go ahead and do that right now because we're covering every single Blue Jays move as it happens. And trust me, you don't want to be late to any of this. All right, let's jump straight into it because there's a lot to talk about. We're only 1 month into the offseason, and Toronto has already committed over $250 million to 3 starting pitchers. Dylan Cease just signed the largest pitching deal in franchise history. Shane Bieber, a former Cy Young winner, is back on a 1-year prove-it contract. And now Cody Povich, the KBO MVP, comes in on a 3-year, $30 million deal that honestly looks like highway robbery. That's the kind of spending we haven't seen from this front office in years, maybe ever at this pace. And here's the thing that should terrify the rest of the league. They're nowhere close to being done. So what happens next? Where does this roster go from here? And how much money are they actually willing to spend? Because right now, Toronto is third in total payroll across all of Major League Baseball, sitting right behind the Yankees and Dodgers. Let me say that again. The Blue Jays are spending like the Yankees and Dodgers right now. That's not something anyone predicted 3 months ago. Let's start with the rotation because it's completely loaded. You've got Kevin Gausman anchoring things, Dylan Cease as the new ace-level arm, Shane Bieber if he's healthy, Bowden Francis, who earned his spot last season, and now Cody Povich, who's guaranteed a role based on his contract. That's 5 guys right there, all legitimate starters. But then you look at the names still hanging around. Jose Barrios, who's been one of the most durable pitchers in baseball over the last several years, is suddenly on the outside looking in. Same with guys like Yario Rodriguez and potentially even Ricky Tiedemann once he's back from Tommy John. That's an insane amount of depth, and it creates some real decisions for the front office. Right now, projections have Barrios potentially sliding into a long relief role, which honestly feels crazy given his track record. But when you stack up the talent and you look at the contracts, it's hard to find room for him in that top 5. And that's where things get interesting because word is starting to leak out that Toronto's at least willing to listen to offers on Barrios. Ben Nicholson-Smith mentioned it on a podcast recently, saying the front office would consider some kind of swap involving him. And when you think about it, it actually makes sense. Barrios is owed $24 million in both 2027 and 2028 with a player option after this coming season. If he struggles or doesn't perform up to expectations, he's picking up that option, and suddenly you're paying closer to $50 million over 2 years for a guy who might not even be in your lineup rotation. That's a tough pill to swallow, especially when you're already spending at the level Toronto is spending right now. So if you can move him to a team that views him as their 3 or 4 starter, someone who has payroll flexibility and doesn't mind taking on that contract, you do it. You get back a middle reliever, maybe a couple mid-level prospects, and you clear future salary off the books. That's smart roster management, and I think there's a real chance it happens before spring training. Now let's talk about the bullpen because that's the next major area that needs addressing. They haven't made a single move there yet, and the market is already moving fast. Devin Williams is gone. Ryan Helsley is gone. Carlos Estevez is off the board. Toronto reportedly showed interest in all 3 of those guys and didn't land any of them. That leaves 2 big names still available, Pete Fairbanks and Edwin Diaz. Pete Fairbanks would be a great addition. He's got closing experience, he's reliable, and he wouldn't cost as much as Diaz. According to John Morosi, the Blue Jays, Marlins, and Tigers are all involved in his market, and there's speculation he could sign before the winter meetings even start. That's this weekend, by the way. So if Toronto wants to lock down their closer before things get chaotic, Fairbanks is the guy to target. And honestly, I think they need to act fast because if they miss on him, they're stuck fighting for Edwin Diaz, who's going to command a much bigger contract and might have other preferred destinations. My prediction, Toronto makes a bullpen move within the next 7 days. Maybe it's Fairbanks, maybe it's someone else, but they're not going into the winter meetings without addressing that back end. Jeff Hoffman was inconsistent during the regular season despite some good underlying numbers, and they need someone who can lock down high-leverage situations. That's non-negotiable if they want to compete for a championship. All right, now let's get to the part everyone's been waiting for, the lineup, specifically the big bat, Right now, the two names dominating the conversation are Kyle Tucker and Bo Bichette. And according to Morosi and pretty much every insider covering this team, it's one or the other, not both, one. So which one is it going to be? Kyle Tucker's market is going to move during the winter meetings. That's starting Sunday and running through Wednesday. And I fully expect Tucker to sign during that window or shortly after, just like we saw with Shohei Ohtani and Juan Soto in previous years. Tucker is the top position player available, and teams are going to go all in on him. The question is whether Toronto can outbid everyone else. And here's the reality. Tucker is probably going to cost somewhere between $350 and $400 million over 10 or 11 years. That's a massive commitment on top of what they've already spent. Bo Bichette's market is developing slower. There are questions about his defense, his base running, his durability, and how long teams are willing to commit to him. But that's actually good news for Toronto because it means they have time. They can focus on Tucker first, and if they miss out, they pivot immediately to Bichette. And honestly, I think if they miss on Tucker, they're going to overpay for Bichette just to make sure they don't walk away empty-handed, because losing both of those guys after spending this much money would be a disaster. So here's how I see it playing out. Toronto goes hard after Kyle Tucker during the winter meetings. If they land him, that's the move. The lineup is set. You've got Tucker, Guerrero, Springer, Kirk, and suddenly this offense is terrifying again. If they don't get Tucker, they immediately shift to Bichette, offer him something like 6 years and $150 million, and bring him back to anchor the infield. Either way, they're getting a major bat. There's no scenario where they walk away without one of these guys. Now let's talk money, because this is where it gets wild. Right now, Toronto's payroll is sitting at $274 million. That puts them third in all of baseball behind only the Yankees and Dodgers. If they sign someone like Pete Fairbanks for around $15 million a year, and then add either Tucker or Bichette at $25 to $35 million annually, you're looking at another $40 to $50 million in commitments. Do the math. That puts them right up there with the Dodgers for the highest payroll in the entire league. Let me repeat that because it's insane. The Toronto Blue Jays, a team that for years was criticized for not spending enough, are about to have one of the top 2 or 3 payrolls in all of Major League Baseball. That's a complete 180 from where this franchise has been, and it shows how serious ownership is about winning right now. They're riding the momentum from last season's playoff run, and they're not letting off the gas. This is championship or bust mode. So what's the final checklist? They need to lock down a closer or high leverage reliever before the winter meetings. They should explore trading Jose Barrios to clear future salary and add bullpen depth. And they absolutely have to land either Kyle Tucker or Bo Bichette to solidify that lineup. If they do all 3 of those things, this is an A-plus offseason, no question. And the rest of the American League should be legitimately worried because Toronto is building something special. Think about what this team looks like if everything comes together. You've got an elite rotation featuring Cease, Gaussman, and Bieber. You've got lockdown bullpen arms. You've got a lineup with Guerrero, Tucker, Bichette, Springer, and Kirk. That's a team that can win the division and make a deep playoff run. That's the kind of roster you build when you're all in on a window, and that window is right now. The Blue Jays are making moves, they're spending money, and they're not messing around. This isn't a rebuild or a retool. This is championship baseball. And if you're another team in the AL East or the American League in general, you should be paying very close attention because Toronto is coming. All right, that's everything. Drop a comment and let me know what you think. Are they getting Tucker or Bichette? What bullpen move do you want to see? And are you as hyped as I am about this offseason? Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and turn on notifications so you don't miss anything. Thanks for watching. And as always, go Jays.